Hey, welcome to the Christ Revealed YouTube channel. I got a great interview coming up for you. Really great to be here with you. Enjoy this interview. Claire, thank you so much for inviting us into your home and having this interview. We're in an interesting part of the world. We kind of have we're up on a perch here looking toward the old city.
Yes, we're on the far north extension of the Mount of Olives, in fact. So the northeastern side of the city. And in fact, when the Roman legions came and besieged the city of Jerusalem in 70, they came from this vantage point, stopped, looked over the city, and then headed down and took it from the north.
Wow, so that's an interesting place to be viewing the city from. So you originally grew up in America, so tell us about your journey a bit.
I'm from San Jose, California, and my husband as well, from Cupertino. We both studied Bible in the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley, California. We both grew up Catholic and became part of the Renewal Movement and the Jesus Movement back in the late 60s and early 70s. And we had a fabulous education at the GTU in the area of Bible. Steve did Hebrew Bible, I did New Testament. At the end of his MA, we were advised by Professor Jacob Milgram, a very famous Jewish scholar teaching at Cal Berkeley, to go spend a year in Israel. So that was 1982 to 83.
Right.
And we took leaves of absence from our jobs. We flew across the ocean. We said goodbye to our family. We'll be gone for a year. And little did we know that we were stepping into Disneyland in its most positive sense, meaning everywhere we turned in this country, there was something that made the Bible come alive, something that illuminated history, that helped us to encounter Jesus in a more powerful way. And although we had had this great education in Berkeley, there was a part of the context of the biblical world and of encountering a large Jewish population living a Jewish lifestyle and the interactions with Gentiles, with seeing the geography and the topography, with living a calendar that was the calendar of the Bible, speaking the languages. It made the whole Bible come alive, but not just the Old Testament. It made the New Testament come alive. So at the end of that year, 1982 to 83, we prayed very seriously about whether we would go back to Berkeley and do his PhD there or whether we would do PhD here. We felt strongly he should do his PhD at Hebrew University. So that was phase 2. We said to the family, we won't be home for 5 to 7 years.
Wow.
They were shocked. And then during the course of studies, while he was working on his PhD, and I wrote my master's thesis, sent it back to the United States, and we really seriously considered about starting a school that would make contextual studies available in English for international Christian students, because we find this context to be so transformative for their faith and ministry.
Yeah. You know, a part of our reason for coming here to Israel was for this series to really, have that almost Disney World experience, be able to take people on, what we feel like is an epic journey. And what's been very interesting for me, and I suspect it sounds like what your experience was when you first got here also, is that all these things that we learn about live sort of abstractly, over in the United States, North America, and you learn about these things, but it's really an entirely different thing to come here and see it and witness it right here on the land. So do you encourage people to have that experience?
I absolutely encourage people to have that experience, because what you say is true. Things that are abstract or theoretical when we read them in the Bible suddenly become concrete. And that goes all the way from things like the plants and the animals. How do you understand the prophets or Jesus's parables without understanding the natural setting of his ministry?
Right.
And also things that are cultural religious, like when you read about the law in the epistles of Paul, and the question of Jewish practice and Gentile Christians and what should they do, those things that are theoretical in America become real because you live those situations out. So I always think that people who aspire to be ministers or teachers or informed Christians who take their Bible seriously should come as early in their lives and ministries as they possibly can. Don't save it as a reward at retirement. come at the beginning because it will transform the way they read the Bible.
And as you said, so you've studied, I guess an area of focus is the New Testament. And yes, you're in kind of the old biblical land, but of course this is where Jesus was. And where are some of the things, when you're teaching or you're organizing these courses? I mean, there's so much, right, to learn. Where do you find like the areas of study are that are important, here in Jerusalem when Christians are coming over and they want to have an understanding?
Yes, well, of course, the first thing we always have to remember is that Jesus was Jewish. His disciples were Jewish. Paul was Jewish. Jesus represents the flowering of a certain aspect of Judaism into the fullness of time. So if we want to understand Jesus, we need to understand Judaism. And that the subjects that I would always, recommend right off the bat are to study the Gospels here in context. So studying Mark, Matthew, and Luke side by side in the context of Israel, in the context of Jewish society. Archaeology is very helpful to know the archaeology of Jerusalem, to know the archaeology of the country and its topography. You've already seen Bethlehem is 20 minutes from Jerusalem. Jerusalem is in the mountains. It's not in a sandy desert.
Right.
Nazareth is a 2-hour drive. So that means at the time of Jesus, for people like Mary and Joseph to come from Nazareth to go down to Bethlehem is going to take them several weeks. Right. Whereas to go from Bethlehem to Jerusalem to pay the redemption price of their firstborn or whatever they're going to do would take them about an hour or two walking. It just gives you context. So study the Gospels, study the Acts of the Apostles. The first half of the Acts of the Apostles takes place in Jerusalem. You need to know what that context is and what the issues were that were driving the earliest Christians. So for Christians, there's just this payback, this win-win of these kinds of contextual studies.
And, with the, I guess I'd call them, for lack of a better term, the famous holy sites where certain things occurred. For you, what was your experience the first time that you visited them? And then now, what kind of experience do you try to give other people who show up here?
Well, we have to admit that when we step here into this context, there is a bit of culture shock. And so we take something like the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which for Western Christians is challenging. But the Catholics, of course, have some comfort zone because there is a Catholic part of the church, and that is, something that they're familiar with. But for us to come face to face with the Orthodox Christian world is to see iconography, paintings, decor, and traditions that are unfamiliar to us. Right. So sometimes that's off-putting for Western Christians. But when we realize that underneath all of that building and artifice is actually the probably historical place of the burial of Jesus, and that what we see is a reflection of the power of the gospel going out to so many lands and so many languages and peoples, and they come back to express their love for Jesus, then it becomes a lesson in church history, and it becomes an expression of devotion. So that's a transformative experience, which you don't necessarily expect to have. A little bit challenging, but with some thought and understanding, you can see this tapestry of church history.
Yeah, and then obviously the varying places where certain main events happened, as we look at the Last Supper and the crucifixion and the resurrection, and the ascension. You can pretty much stand in one place and kind of look around, when you have a view, and you can point and say, there's the areas that, we believe it all happened.
Yes, I think that there was one Jewish conception, really, that Jerusalem is like the belly button of the earth. It's like an umbilical cord connecting heaven and earth. And from the point of view of church history, certainly it is the happening place. And it's so tiny, a kilometer on each side of the old city wall. It's amazingly small.
That's it for this particular interview. Thanks for joining me. Really excited to take this ongoing journey with you as we keep bringing more content. If you haven't already, you really should subscribe to this channel. There's a lot of phenomenal content coming down the road into the future that you'll want to know about. Leave a comment down here. I think people would love to hear from you, and then you can hear from them too. If you liked it, go ahead and give a like. It only takes half a second, and share this with people that you care about. The world needs more light in it right now. So thanks for being with me. Hope to connect with you again soon.